Welcome to the final installment of our series focusing on the threat of terrorist attacks on our nation's schools. Tonight, it is all about practical advice. If you've been watching all week, you probably have seen the guest on the program scare the living bat's not out of you, wondering, okay, Glenn, I get it. Now what do I do with the news? Your kids may be dead soon. News at 11. That kind of stuff is not helpful. Tonight, we're lucky enough to have Kenneth Trump. He is one of the nation's foremost experts on school safety and school security, here to back us up. He is also joined again with Brad Thor, author of The First Commandment and the former member of the Department of Homeland Security's Analytic Red Cell program. Brad, let me start with you. Tell me the 4 Ds.
Okay, Glenn, the 4 Ds were developed by Colonel Dave Grossman, and he's one of the premier law enforcement trainers in the country. And they are deter, detect, delay, and destroy. Deter. You want an armed presence at your school. Unarmed security guards are no good. They give a false sense of security to parents, teachers, and students. Even if your school can't afford a police officer to be on site all times, invite the police from your local law enforcement agencies to do their paperwork at your school. Come by for coffee. Even random police stopping by will help terrorists say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with the school, I'm going to move on. That's the deter. Now the detect is parents, teachers, school authorities, they need to be watching for terrorists who are surveilling schools. We've talked about how they're like sharks and they'll come in and gather their intelligence. These might not be guys that look like Muhammad Atta. These could be blonde-haired, blue-eyed people trying to figure out where the school is weak. Those are the first 2. And then the delay. If there is a terrorist attack at your children's school, there needs to be a plan in place that helps get those students to safety. This lock and drop and stay inside the classroom might not be the best thing, because that might just hold them till the terrorists come and round them up and take them into the gym like Beslan, like we saw there. And finally, destroy. This is one of the biggest lessons that was learned in the Israeli school massacre in Ma'alat and in Beslan. For every second we wait to send law enforcement in, children are going to die.
Ken, this is totally different than anything that we have ever dealt with before. I mean, it is my understanding that the typical thing with a hostage would be delay. Let's keep these guys on the phone. Let's not piss them off, etc. But these people have no intention of anything other than killing everybody inside.
Oh, absolutely. They're going in with the idea that they are not coming out, and neither is anybody who's already there. And we have to recognize it's a totally different situation, and it's a totally different situation that law enforcement and school officials really haven't prepared for tactically, but more important, mentally.
Okay, how do you know when Brad said a second ago that you need to detect, and they may just look like me or whatever, how do you detect them? I don't know what I'm doing. What am I looking for?
Well, one thing that we stress, Glenn, with school officials in our training is that they know their school and what is normal better than anybody, even better than me as a security consultant coming from the outside. They know what's normal. They have to be able to recognize and, most of all, act on what's abnormal. And we don't train our teachers to do that. We have situations in schools where they've been user-friendly, they've been open for so long historically that people actually talk themselves out of going with their gut feeling. And the first thing, as we all know, is to go with your gut feeling. If you think something's wrong, act upon it. Do something. Pick up the phone, stop somebody, challenge somebody, or at least call for help.
I have to tell you, one of the best books I've ever read is The Gift of Fear. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But it talks about that dogs don't have this special sense. They're reacting on you, but you're dismissing it. You see something in your school, but most likely, if you do see something that doesn't look right, I mean, unless it's so obviously not right, you're like, well, I'll dismiss it. That can't be what I think it is.
And you don't want to do that, Glenn. You've got to trust your gut. Now, you need to work with your police department. And I like to say your police department, not the police department, because they are your partners in protecting the schools. And we've talked about this a little bit on camera, off camera, that the police departments, the sheriff departments, they're the ones that are eager to get these things implemented in the schools. Parents need to work on the schools. Law enforcement's ready to come on board and help, but the schools need to be convinced that parents want this and they want law enforcement brought on.
Ken, this is probably not the forum to ask this because I'm on national TV, but I've already done it on national radio, and I don't know if this is even right. I talked to my ex-wife, and one of my children is in public school, and I said, I'm going to call you, or if you see something, if something happens, and I don't care if it's in Kansas, if you see a school taken or if I see one, I'm going to call you. I don't care if you're in the job, job interview. You say, excuse me, you go directly to the school, say my child has a dentist appointment, and get them out of school. Right or wrong?
Well, I think it's actually a natural parental instinct. One of the things when we're working on school emergency plans is how the school officials plan on dealing with parents who come flocking to the school. We've seen it in school shootings, from Columbine to other incidents, and it's going to be a normal reaction. I think we have to recognize for school officials and for safety officials, sometimes the best place is for the kids to be secured in the building. It's going to be situational.
No, well, what I'm saying is, if I see it in another city.
Right. And we've talked about this. If you see it in another city, if everybody across America does this, it could create chaos and play into the terrorists' hands. Now, if we hear about a school siege scenario in, let's say, Long Beach, California, schools across the country should seriously consider locking their schools down at that point if it's a terrorist attack.
But guys, this is exactly what we're talking about, though. They lock the school down themselves. You're only making them sitting ducks. Is there any kind of talk of any kind of safe room or someplace where the kids are actually protected? I mean, it's almost like the duck and cover thing.
Some of the things that we've talked about is that we're actually buying some time here, and when we've practiced from lockdowns and from active shooter situations, we're buying time. The flip side of the coin on just releasing kids to send them home is then you've got them out on the streets, you have no parents at home, and the kids are supervising themselves. So that's a concern as well.
Okay, Ken, so I'm an average parent, and I was talking to Bernie Carrick on the radio today, and he said, you know, Glenn, you got to call your schools and find out, you know, what their safety procedures are. And I'm like, Bernie, that's good for you. You're a former commissioner of a police department in New York City. I don't know what it's supposed to look like. They could tell me, we're going to have Jello class, and I'd be pretty okay with it. I don't know. Is that right or wrong? Specifically, if I say, I want to call my school, I want to make sure they have safety procedures in that are right, what are the things that I should be looking for or encouraging them to do?
Here's the thing that you need to make sure that you ask as a parent. Not only do you have safety plans and do you have crisis teams, but more specifically, who's on that team? When have they met? When's the last time that you actually sat down and trained with law enforcement? What type of exercises have you done with your plan? Have you done tabletop exercises? Do you actually practice lockdown drills and evacuations? And if so, when? When were the last 3 times that you did it? When were the last 3 times that your crisis teams met? Because what we know from doing evaluations across the country in schools is that most schools have plans and teams on paper, but they're not practicing. The teachers haven't been trained, and the plans haven't been tested and exercised, and they haven't been working closely with law enforcement on the details of those plans. So as a parent, you're not necessarily looking for every nuts and bolts step, but you want to find out, is it an active living plan or is it collecting dust upon a shelf?
Do either of you know what the percentages are where there is active? I mean, we do fire drills. I remember doing the nuke test.
And this is what's interesting, is in the last 25 years, we haven't had a student die in America in a fire, yet we do fire drills all the time. And now because of Columbine and Virginia Tech, we have these active shooter scenarios. But very few places in this country, Orange County would be one of the leaders, Orange County, California, where they actually are doing terrorist siege scenarios. So we train for fire drills all the time, but we're not looking at things like Beslan, when Al-Qaeda has said, what we visited on Russia, we will visit here 100%. You and I have talked about, it looks like 9/9 or September 10th, 2001. We've got all these dots pointing at our children. Al-Qaeda said they're going to target our children. We need to be focusing on the schools. And what I hear from my sources is less than 30% of the school safety plans are even developed with first responders like law enforcement.
Okay. Absolutely. That's right on target, and they're not practiced. They're sitting on a shelf collecting dust from coast to coast. We're finding exactly that. The schools aren't even practicing the lockdown drills, much less more sophisticated drills.
And as the terrorists change their tactics, the school plans need to be changed. They are living documents that should be forbidden to sit on shelves.
Okay, Ken, tell me, because there's something going on with buses, but we don't know what. They could be just being filled with explosives and blow up football games. They could be pulled up, you know, in the line with everything else. They might be driven into a school. We don't know, but there's a lot of dots on these buses. Tell me the things that would help a parent when they look at a bus. What should they look for? I said on the radio today, I think you've got to know who your bus driver is.
You have to know who your bus driver is, and most importantly, you need to know what type of training your school bus drivers have had. School districts do a great job at training drivers how to drive the bus, very poor job at training them in security procedures, recognizing and reporting strangers, what to do in an emergency situation, how you would get a hold of the police, what to do when the police show up, what to do if you have somebody pull a gun on a bus, what to do if you have a stranger, a parent, or an irate parent or an unusual person, a terrorist, approach a bus, even just simple things.
You know what, Glenn? At the end of the day, what I tell people is demand nothing short of absolute devotion to the school safety plan from your schools. You're a taxpayer. You pay those schools. If they say, we can't share this with you, it's sensitive information, say fine. Then I want somebody who I trust from the PTA on this. I want to form a committee, and I want them to report back to me a parent who says, I can't give you the details, but yes, it works, or no, it doesn't work. And get your local law enforcement agencies involved.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brad. Always a pleasure. Ken, thank you very much. All week we've been telling you about the special The Perfect Day reports that are appearing in the free email newsletter. Please, if you haven't signed up yet at glennbeck.com, the time to do it is right now. Ken Trump has written a must-read guide. It's just full of tips and advice to prepare you and your children for any kind of crisis at the school. Also, I've been promising it to you all week, an exclusive video clip showing terrorists training for a school takeover and barking out commands in English. That video will be in the newsletter tomorrow. Don't miss it. Go to glennbeck.com and sign up right now. It is completely free.